Stop scrolling. This is not just another video you casually watch and forget. This moment, right now, might be the exact turning point your life has been building toward. Because if you truly understand what I'm about to reveal, you won't just think differently, you will see reality differently. You will begin to recognize patterns you once ignored, connections you once dismissed, and a deeper intelligence guiding everything around you. And here's the truth most people are never told: you what you call God is not separate from you, not distant, not judging from somewhere far away, but woven into the very fabric of your thoughts, your energy, your awareness. And once you unlock this final key, you don't just believe in God, you experience it. Scientists are now discovering that reality itself behaves like a field of probabilities, collapsing into form only when observed. Ancient spiritual traditions have said this for thousands of years in different words. So what if I told you that your consciousness is not just observing reality, it is shaping it? What if the feeling you've had your entire life, that there's something more, something hidden just beyond the surface, is actually true? Stay with me, because by the end of this, you may never look at your life, your struggles, or even your identity the same way again. Short engagement request before we go deeper: take 1 second to ground this moment. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me which part of the United States you're watching from. I want to see how far this message is reaching. And here's your task. Don't skip this. After watching, come back and comment one realization that hit you the hardest. Let's begin. Chapter 1: 3,000 words, plain paragraph. To begin unlocking the final key to understanding God, we have to first dissolve one of the biggest illusions ever created: the idea that God is separate from reality. Most people grow up being taught that God is somewhere, out there, watching, judging, rewarding, or punishing. But this perspective, while comforting in some ways, creates a hidden distance between you and the very source of existence. And that distance is exactly what prevents deeper understanding. Because the truth is not that God is outside of reality. The truth is that reality itself is the expression of God. When you start to explore quantum physics, something fascinating happens. Scientists observe that at the smallest levels, particles don't behave like solid objects. They behave like waves of probability, existing in multiple states at once until they are observed. This phenomenon, often referred to as the observer effect, suggests that consciousness plays a role in shaping physical reality. Now pause for a moment and really let that sink in. If reality at its core is not fixed, but responsive to observation, then consciousness is not just a passive experience. It is an active force. And if consciousness is fundamental to reality, then what you call God may not be an external being, but the infinite field of awareness from which all things emerge. This aligns deeply with ancient spiritual teachings that describe God not as a figure, but as an infinite presence, an all-pervading intelligence that exists within everything. The difference is that now, modern science is beginning to catch up to what mystics have known for centuries. But here is where it becomes personal. If consciousness shapes reality, and you are conscious, then your thoughts, your beliefs, and your emotional state are not just internal experiences. They are influencing the world around you in ways you may not even realize. This is where manifestation begins to make sense, not as some mystical fantasy, but as a natural function of how reality operates. When you hold a thought with enough focus and emotional intensity, you are essentially tuning into a specific frequency. And just like a radio picks up a station that matches its frequency, your reality begins to align with the energy you consistently emit. This doesn't mean you can instantly create anything you want without effort. But it does mean that your inner state is constantly shaping your outer experience. And this is the part most people miss. They try to change their life by changing external circumstances, without realizing that those circumstances are reflections of internal patterns. To truly transform your reality, you have to go deeper than surface-level actions. You have to understand the patterns of thought and belief that are running beneath your awareness. Because those patterns are the blueprint through which your reality is being constructed. And when you start to observe your thoughts, instead of being controlled by them, something powerful happens. You begin to create space between you and the mental noise. And in that space, you start to experience a deeper level of awareness, one that is not reactive, not limited, but expansive and still. Many spiritual traditions refer to this as presence, or pure consciousness. It is the part of you that exists beyond identity, beyond labels, beyond the story you tell yourself about who you are. And this is where the concept of God begins to shift from something abstract to something experiential. Because when you access that state of pure awareness, you are not just thinking about God. You are connecting with the very essence of it. Now, let's take this even further. If reality is shaped by consciousness, and consciousness is fundamental to existence, then everything you perceive is, in a sense, a projection within awareness. This doesn't mean the world is an illusion in the sense that it doesn't exist, but it does mean that your experience of the world is filtered through your perception. and perception is shaped by belief. This is why two people can experience the same situation in completely different ways. One sees opportunity, the other sees limitation. One feels empowered, the other feels helpless. The external situation may be the same, but the internal interpretation creates a completely different reality. So when you begin to change your beliefs, you are not just changing how you think, you are changing how you experience reality itself. And this is where manifestation becomes deeply spiritual, because it's not just about getting what you want. It's about aligning with a deeper truth about who you are and how reality works. It's about realizing that you are not a powerless observer in a random universe, but an active participant in a deeply interconnected system. And the more you become aware of this, the more intentional your life becomes. You start to notice synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem too precise to be random. You start to feel guided, as if there is an underlying intelligence orchestrating events in ways you can't fully explain. And instead of resisting life, you begin to flow with it. This doesn't mean challenges disappear. In fact, challenges often become more meaningful, because you start to see them as opportunities for growth rather than obstacles to avoid. Every difficulty becomes a mirror, reflecting something within you that is ready to evolve. And when you approach life from this perspective, you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" That shift alone can transform your entire experience. Because instead of feeling like a victim of circumstances, you begin to feel like a co-creator of your reality. And this is where the idea of God becomes deeply empowering rather than distant or intimidating. Because if God is not separate from you, but expressed through you, then your ability to create, to imagine, to feel, and to choose is part of that divine expression. You are not just existing in the universe, you are participating in its unfolding. And the more conscious you become of this, the more aligned your life becomes with a deeper sense of purpose. But here's the key that most people overlook. Understanding this intellectually is not enough. You can learn all the theories, all the concepts, all the philosophies, but if you don't apply them, nothing changes. Real transformation happens through awareness and practice. It happens when you start paying attention to your thoughts, your emotions, and your reactions in real time. It happens when you catch yourself falling into old patterns and consciously choose a different response. And yes, this takes effort. It takes patience. It takes consistency. But every moment of awareness strengthens your ability to shape your reality intentionally. And over time, those small shifts begin to compound into major changes. You start to feel more grounded, more present, more in control of your inner world. And as your inner world changes, your outer world begins to reflect that shift. Relationships improve, opportunities appear, and even challenges start to feel different. Not because they disappear, but because your relationship with them changes. And this brings us closer to the final key. Because understanding God is not about finding a final answer. It's about experiencing a deeper level of awareness. It's about recognizing that the same intelligence that governs the movement of galaxies is present within you as the ability to think, to feel, to perceive, and to choose. And when you truly grasp this, not just as an idea, but as a lived experience, you begin to see that you were never separate from the source to begin with. You were always a part of it, expressing it in a unique and individual way. And this realization doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you humble, because you start to see the same presence in others, in nature, in every aspect of existence. You begin to feel connected in a way that goes beyond surface level differences. And from that place, your actions naturally become more aligned with compassion, understanding, and purpose. Because you're no longer acting from fear or lack, you're acting from awareness. And awareness, at its core, is the bridge between you and what you call God. Now that you've begun to question the illusion of separation, and understand that consciousness is not just observing reality, but actively participating in its creation, we can move deeper into the next layer of this realization, the hidden structure of reality itself, and how your mind interacts with it in ways far more powerful than you've ever been taught. Because understanding God is not just about realizing that everything is connected. It's about recognizing the mechanism through which this connection operates. And this is where the concept of the quantum field becomes essential. In modern physics, the quantum field is described as an invisible, underlying fabric that exists everywhere, containing all possibilities before they become physical reality. Everything you see, touch, and experience emerges from this field. It is not empty space. It is alive with potential, constantly fluctuating, constantly responding. Now, if you connect this with what we discussed earlier about consciousness influencing reality, a profound question arises. What is the relationship between your mind and this field of infinite potential? Because if your awareness has the ability to collapse possibilities into actual experiences, then your thoughts are not just random events in your brain. They are signals being sent into the very fabric of existence. And this is where manifestation begins to move from theory into something deeply practical. Most people misunderstand manifestation as simply thinking positively and hoping good things will happen. But the truth is far more complex and far more powerful. Manifestation is not about forcing reality to obey your desires. It is about aligning your internal state with a specific version of reality that already exists within the quantum field. Think about it like this. If the quantum field contains infinite possibilities, then every version of your life, every success, every failure, every outcome, already exists as a potential. Your consciousness acts like a tuner, selecting which of these possibilities becomes your experienced reality. And what determines that selection is not just your conscious thoughts, but your deeply held beliefs, your emotional patterns, and your sense of identity. This is why two people can use the same techniques, the same affirmations, the same visualizations, and get completely different results. Because it's not the surface level action that matters most. It's the underlying state of being. If you consciously say, I am successful, but deep down you believe you are not worthy, that hidden belief will dominate your experience. The quantum field responds not to what you say you want, but to what you consistently are. And this is where the real work begins. Because to change your reality, you don't just have to change your thoughts, you have to change your identity. You have to become the version of yourself that naturally aligns with the reality you want to experience. And this is not about pretending or faking it. It's about gradually shifting your internal state through awareness, repetition, and emotional integration. One of the most powerful ways to do this is by understanding the role of emotion in manifestation. Emotions are not just reactions, they are frequencies. When you feel fear, doubt, or scarcity, you are tuning into a certain range of possibilities within the quantum field. When you feel gratitude, confidence, and abundance, you are tuning into a completely different range. And the key here is consistency. A single positive thought will not override a lifetime of negative conditioning. But repeated exposure to new patterns of thought and emotion can begin to rewire your subconscious mind. This is where neuroscience and spirituality begin to overlap. The brain is not fixed, it is constantly changing based on your experiences and focus. This process, known as neuroplasticity, means that the more you practice a certain way of thinking and feeling, the more natural it becomes. Over time, what once felt unnatural, like believing in your own worth or trusting the flow of life, becomes your default state. And as your internal state shifts, your external reality begins to reflect that change. But here is something even deeper that most people overlook. Your subconscious mind does not distinguish between what is real and what is vividly imagined. This means that when you visualize a desired outcome with strong emotion, your brain begins to encode that experience as if it has already happened. This is why elite athletes use visualization techniques to improve performance. They are not just imagining success. They are training their nervous system to operate as if success is already their reality, and you can apply the same principle to every area of your life. But again, this is not about daydreaming without action. It is about aligning your thoughts, emotions, and actions in a coherent direction. Because when these three elements are aligned, something powerful happens. You move from being reactive to being intentional. You stop waiting for life to happen to you, and you start actively shaping your experience. And this brings us closer to understanding the divine intelligence behind all of this, because the quantum field is not just a mechanical system. It operates with a level of order and coherence that suggests something deeper. Many scientists hesitate to call this God, but the parallels are undeniable. An infinite field of potential, responsive to consciousness, giving rise to all forms of existence. This is not far from how many spiritual traditions describe the nature of God. The difference is in the language used. Science uses terms like energy, probability, and fields. Spirituality uses terms like consciousness, spirit, and divine presence. But they are pointing toward the same underlying reality. And when you begin to see this connection, something shifts in your perception. You start to realize that you are not just living in a random universe. You are participating in an intelligent system that is responsive, adaptive, and deeply interconnected. And this realization changes how you approach everything. You begin to take responsibility for your inner state, not out of guilt, but out of empowerment. Because you understand that your thoughts and emotions are not meaningless. They are part of a larger process of creation. You also begin to trust the timing of your life more deeply, because if reality is being shaped through a complex interaction of consciousness and the quantum field, then not everything can or should happen instantly. There is a process of alignment, a process of integration, a process of becoming, and sometimes what feels like a delay is actually preparation. Sometimes what feels like rejection is actually redirection. And when you start to trust this process, you release the need to control every outcome. You still take action, you still set intentions, but you do so with a sense of openness rather than force. And this is where manifestation becomes less about effort and more about alignment. Because instead of pushing against reality, you are working with it. You are listening, observing, adjusting. You are becoming more aware of the subtle signals that guide you. Your intuition, your instincts, your inner knowing. And the more you trust these signals, the more synchronized your life becomes. Opportunities appear at the right time. People enter your life with perfect timing. Ideas flow more easily. And what once felt like coincidence begins to feel like coordination. This is not because you have gained control over the universe, but because you have aligned yourself with its natural flow. And this alignment is what many spiritual traditions refer to as being in tune with God. Not as a distant entity, but as a living intelligence that you are constantly interacting with. And the deeper you go into this understanding, the more you begin to see that your life is not just a series of random events. It is a dynamic, evolving expression of consciousness exploring itself. Every experience, every challenge, every moment of joy or pain is part of this exploration. And when you start to view your life through this lens, even the most difficult experiences begin to carry a different meaning. They are no longer just obstacles. They are opportunities for expansion. They are invitations to deepen your awareness, to refine your understanding, to grow beyond your current limitations. And this is where the concept of God becomes not just something to believe in, but something to experience directly through your own evolution. Because as you expand your awareness, you are not just learning about reality, you are participating in its unfolding. And this participation is the essence of creation itself. You are not separate from the process. You are the process, expressing itself in a unique and individual form. And the more conscious you become of this, the more intentional your life becomes. You begin to choose your thoughts more carefully, not out of fear, but out of awareness. You begin to cultivate emotions that align with the reality you want to experience. You begin to take actions that reflect your highest understanding of yourself. And slowly, steadily, your life begins to transform, not through sudden miracles, but through consistent alignment. And this is the deeper truth of manifestation. It is not about instant results or magical thinking. It is about becoming the kind of person who naturally experiences a certain kind of reality. It is about embodying the frequency of what you desire until it becomes your default state. And when that happens, the external world has no choice but to reflect that internal shift. Because the outer world is always a mirror of the inner state. And this is the bridge between science and spirituality, between the quantum field and the concept of God. It is the realization that reality is not something happening to you. It is something happening through you. And the more you understand this, the closer you come to unlocking the final key, because that key is not hidden somewhere outside of you. It is within your awareness, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be activated. And as you continue this journey, you will begin to see that everything you have experienced, everything you have learned, and everything you are becoming is leading you toward a deeper understanding of what you truly are. Not just a body, not just a mind, but a conscious expression of an infinite, intelligent universe. And that realization, when fully integrated, changes everything. Now we arrive at the final chapter. The point where everything you've heard so far begins to converge into a single realization. A realization so simple yet so profound, that most people spend their entire lives circling around it without ever fully seeing it. Because the final key to understanding God is not something you acquire, not something you learn like information, and not something that exists outside of you waiting to be discovered. The final key is a shift in awareness, a recognition of what has always been present, but overlooked. And to understand this, you must go beyond the mind itself. Up until now, we have explored thoughts, beliefs, emotions, the quantum field, and the mechanics of manifestation. But all of these still exist within a deeper context, the awareness in which they appear. And that awareness is the doorway to everything. Right now, as you are listening to these words, there is something in you that is aware. It is aware of the sound, aware of the meaning, aware of your thoughts reacting to what is being said. That awareness does not have a shape, it does not have a form, it cannot be seen as an object, because it is the very thing that sees. And this is where the deepest misunderstanding occurs. Most people identify themselves with their thoughts, their emotions, their past experiences, their identity. They say, "This is who I am." But all of those things are changing, constantly shifting, constantly evolving. If something can change, it cannot be your true essence. Your thoughts come and go. Your emotions rise and fall. Your identity evolves over time. But the awareness that observes all of this remains constant. It has always been there, from your earliest memory until this very moment. And if you look closely, you will realize something extraordinary. That awareness is not separate from what you call God. In fact, it is the closest, most direct experience of it. Not as a concept, not as a belief, but as a living reality. This is why so many spiritual traditions point inward rather than outward. They are not telling you to find something new. They are guiding you to recognize what is already present. And this recognition is not intellectual. You cannot think your way into it. You have to experience it directly. You have to become aware of awareness itself. And when this happens, even for a moment, everything changes. Because you begin to see that you are not the voice in your head. You are the space in which that voice appears. You are not the emotions that overwhelm you. You are the presence that allows them to be felt. You are not limited to the story of your past. You are the awareness in which that story is remembered. And this shift, subtle as it may seem, is the final key. Because once you stop identifying with the temporary and start recognizing the eternal aspect of your being, your entire relationship with life transforms. Fear begins to lose its grip, because fear is rooted in the idea of loss, of something being taken away. But awareness itself cannot be taken away. It is not something you possess. It is what you are. And this realization brings a level of peace that is not dependent on external circumstances. It is not something you have to maintain or protect. It is simply the natural state that reveals itself when you stop clinging to what you are not. Now, let's connect this back to everything we've discussed. The quantum field, manifestation, consciousness shaping reality, all of these are expressions within awareness. They are mechanisms, processes, dynamics. But awareness itself is beyond all of them. It is the foundation upon which they exist, and this is where the idea of God reaches its deepest meaning. Not as a force that you interact with, but as the very essence of being itself. Infinite, formless, timeless. And yet, expressing itself through every form, every moment, every experience, including you. And when you begin to live from this understanding, something remarkable happens. You no longer feel the need to constantly control your life, because you trust the intelligence that is unfolding through it. You still set intentions, you still take action, but there is a sense of ease, a sense of flow. You are not pushing against reality, you are moving with it. And this is where manifestation reaches its highest level, not as a tool to get what you want, but as a natural expression of alignment. Because when you are rooted in awareness, your thoughts become clearer, your emotions become more balanced, your actions become more intentional. And as a result, your reality reflects that clarity. You begin to attract experiences that resonate with your state of being. Not because you are forcing them, but because you are aligned with them. And this alignment is what creates a life that feels meaningful, purposeful, and deeply connected. But here is something even more important. As you deepen into this awareness, your sense of self begins to expand beyond the individual. You start to see that the same awareness that exists within you exists within everyone else. The same presence that you recognize as your true nature is present in every person, every living being. And this realization changes how you relate to others. Compassion arises naturally, not as something you force, but as something you feel. Because you recognize that at the deepest level, there is no separation. The differences you see on the surface, beliefs, identities, backgrounds, are expressions of diversity within a unified field of awareness. And when you interact with others from this place, your relationships transform. You listen more deeply, you react less impulsively, you respond with greater understanding. And this doesn't mean you become passive or lose your sense of individuality. It means your individuality becomes an expression of something greater, rather than something isolated. You begin to live in a way that reflects both your uniqueness and your connection to the whole. And this is where life takes on a new dimension. Every moment becomes an opportunity to express awareness more fully. Every interaction becomes a reflection of your understanding. Even the simplest experiences, breathing, walking, observing, take on a deeper significance, because you are no longer just going through the motions. You are present, fully engaged, fully aware. And in that presence, you begin to notice something that was always there but rarely seen. The quiet intelligence behind everything. The way life unfolds with a kind of natural order, even amidst chaos. The way solutions appear when you are open, the way clarity arises when you are still. And you begin to trust this intelligence not blindly, but through direct experience. You see how resistance creates friction, how alignment creates flow. You see how attachment to specific outcomes creates tension, while openness allows possibilities to emerge. And slowly you begin to let go, not of your desires, but of your need to control how they manifest. You become more flexible, more adaptable, more in tune with the present moment. And this is where true freedom begins. Not the freedom to control everything, but the freedom to move with life without being bound by fear, attachment, or limitation. And from this place, you can still create, still achieve, still pursue your goals, but you do so from a foundation of awareness rather than insecurity. You are no longer trying to complete yourself through external achievements. You are expressing a completeness that already exists within you. And this shift changes everything. Because when you are no longer driven by lack, your actions become more authentic. You choose paths that resonate with your deeper truth, rather than paths that are based on fear or expectation. And as a result, your life begins to reflect a greater sense of harmony. But perhaps the most profound aspect of this realization is how it changes your understanding of God. Because at this point, the question is no longer, where is God? Or, what is God? The question dissolves entirely. Because you realize that what you have been seeking, is the very awareness through which you have been seeking. It was never separate, never distant, never hidden. It was always here, in every moment, in every experience, in every breath. And the only reason it seemed out of reach was because you were looking for it as an object, rather than recognizing it as the subject. And this is the final key. Not something you hold, but something you are. And once this is seen, truly seen, it cannot be unseen. You may still experience challenges, still have moments of doubt, still navigate the complexities of life. But beneath all of that, there is a deeper knowing, a quiet, unshakable awareness that remains constant. And that awareness is what connects everything. It is what allows you to experience life, to grow, to evolve. It is the foundation of existence itself. And when you live from this understanding, life becomes less about searching and more about expressing. Less about becoming and more about being. You stop chasing fulfillment in the future, and start recognizing it in the present. You stop looking for answers outside and start discovering them within. And in that shift, something extraordinary happens. You don't just understand God, you live it. Not as a concept, not as a belief, but as a direct, continuous experience. And that is the ultimate realization. That what you have been seeking your entire life is not something you need to find. It is something you need to remember.